Kevin Gordon here from Autosavant.com with a video review of the 2012 Mazda 3i SkyActiv. Before we get into anything else, let me talk a little bit about this SkyActiv thing that Mazda's doing. One, it's SkyActiv with no E, it ends in a V, and they've put nice large logos on the back of the car. SkyActiv is Mazda's effort to significantly increase the fuel economy of the models that it's available on, which at this point is the Mazda 3 and the new CX-5. And they're doing that with no hybrid technology. It doesn't have stop-start. They are doing it with three sort of ways. One is with the engine. So the engine is a 2-liter direct injected inline 4 that makes 155 horsepower. That in and of itself isn't all that impressive, but some of the things they shoved into it are actually impressive. It's a 13-to-1 compression ratio. I mean, it's an astronomical compression ratio for a car, especially one that'll run on regular fuel. It has 4-into-1 headers, so it has a real set of headers on it. And they did a bunch of little tweaks and tricks to make it lighter, to make it to have less friction in the engine. And the result is, with an automatic transmission, they've hit that 40 mile per gallon highway number. You'll notice they said with the automatic transmission, because contrary to the way a lot of cars are these days, the automatic SkyActiv models actually get better fuel economy than the manual versions. So the automatic transmission in this car is the second way Mazda's really trying to crank up fuel economy without going to any hybrid or any other special tricks. And the automatic transmission in this thing is interesting. It's both, in a lot of ways, a single clutch and a torque converter automatic. So the typical split in automatic transmissions, if we exclude continuously variable transmissions, are either torque converter automatics, where there's basically a wet torque converter, you could call it a clutch, that allows the automatic transmission to work. And that's what makes stop and go traffic, or if you've ever driven a dual clutch in stop and go traffic up a hill, you know, pulling away from a stop smooth and all those things. But Mazda's also added a clutch pack to the torque converter, which means that once you're underway, the clutch actually takes over and makes it so that shifting is much crisper and sharper than it would typically be in a torque converter. The third thing Mazda did to try to make this as fuel efficient as possible is the body structure in the SkyActiv models is actually lighter than the non-SkyActiv models. And from what I can tell, there's no dynamic penalty for their lightening efforts. You know, they changed some of the substructures in the body. They've gone to more of a reusable component set on those. And so this car is, in addition to everything else, lighter than the other non-SkyActiv models. Does it all work? Well, I would say that they're getting 5 or 6% better efficiency than they used to out of the old 2-liter inline 4, but they're delivering more horsepower than they used to with their littler inline 4. So I think that works. I mean, you get more power, you get a little bit better fuel economy. It's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. And without any nonsense, without any sort of penalty from a driving dynamics perspective. And how are the driving dynamics in the Mazda 3 4-door that we're in right now? They're very good. The steering's well weighted. The body's well controlled in any kind of active driving. The automatic transmission's as good as an automatic transmission gets. It rev matches downshifts, and it's pretty quick to respond when called upon by the automatic stick here. One of those other nice little features that I found is the gas pedal on this car is different than many of the drive-by-wire cars are these days. And what do I mean by that? Well, more and more I find that drive-by-wire cars and modern cars in general, once you get into pressing the gas pedal or the accelerator down to a point that you're accelerating, that's sort of all there is. You can push it down all the way to the floor and it'll downshift, or it'll do, it'll try harder, but your sort of thrust doesn't change all that much. Well, in this, the gas pedal's relationship to thrust is very linear. If you press into it a little bit, you accelerate a little bit. And as you get into it farther and farther and farther, it actually causes the car to accelerate harder, which is really nice. From a performance orientation perspective, that is, one of those things that you're looking for as you drive a car. You don't just want that sort of light switch of I press on the pedal, it goes faster, I let off of it, it coasts. From a ride and handling perspective, again, it handles very well. It handles as sporty as you're going to find in the class. This particular one I'm in right now still has winter tires on it. It's got Bridgestone Blizzaks, and they make it a bit splashier than I think you'd find with a good set of all seasons on it. So I'm not going to do any of the performance driving segments or really take you for rides along back roads, because I don't think I'd really be being fair to the car. But what I can tell you is, even with those winter tires on, there's still a lot of good going on with the chassis. The one thing that the average buyer may find is this is the stiffest car in its class. From a bumpy concrete highway or a pothole rutted road perspective, there's a lot more body motion going on in here than you'll find amongst its competitors. So you've got that dynamic trade-off between a firm ride that handles well and corners flat and something that is a little bit busier than you'll find across the rest of the compact sedan lineup. Seating position in here is good. You've got a tilt telescope steering wheel, power seats. We're in the Grand Touring I model of the Mazda 3. So the only one above this is the Grand Touring S model. That's a non-SkyActiv and has the 2.4 liter inline 4. The interior is where the Mazda 3 starts to fall apart a little bit. It's the oldest, I think, of the compact car segment at this point, and it is showing its age from an interior design perspective. There's little things that some people won't notice and it will never bother them, but for people who are wound a little tight like I am, there's little reminders that you could have something nicer. I don't know if you can see in the video this panel, but this panel starts down at the windowsill and runs up, and then the pod that holds the tweeter for the stereo, it looks like it's an afterthought. All of this, the interior of the door winds up being uncovered, so you get the body color of the car coming through, and it's unpainted, and you can see that in all the little panel gaps. The dash is at least rubberized up here. All this is a big chunk of hard plastic. The stereo and infotainment setup is very, very simple. Simple to a fault, though. This car, understanding it's a bit difficult to see, but I'll show you a picture of it. Has navigation and a radio readout that's up high on the dash, which is good for keeping you from being distracted in driving. But the only way to interact with the navigation is through this 3-button setup where you get a toggle switch and 2 buttons, and then you get nav, back, and info. To get the nav in this stuff, you have to spring for the technology package on the Grand Touring model. And that gets you the nav, which I'll talk a little bit more about, rain sensing windshield wipers, blind spot detection, which I've always said I'd prefer just to have a blind spot mirror, but the blind spot detection on this car does actually work quite well. It's not intrusive. It beeps at you if you put your signal on when it thinks somebody's over there. But it's worked reliably. There hasn't been a time where it's falsely lit or, not lit when somebody's over there. The tech package also gets you a 10-speaker Bose branded center point stereo. And the stereo is very, very good. The center point is a digital sound processing system that Bose puts in. It's basically some kind of dynamic equalizer. The sound is great. Here, hidden up in this area is a center channel that bounces off the front windshield. And you'll notice the tweeters in this car actually point forward, which is smart because to get a good front stage set up in the stereo, they're actually using the windscreen to project sound back to you instead of pointing it directly at you, which gets them some more space and better separation between the two. The stereo gets loud without really being boomy. Nothing rattles. It's got pretty solid bass. It's got a subwoofer mounted in the rear deck. It's as good of a stereo as you're going to get in this class of car, so that's definitely a plus. Back to the nav, it's a tiny little 3.5, 4-inch screen that sits up there, and if you need nav, again, it does the job, but you cannot interact with it with the exception of stored locations while you're underway, and putting destinations into it could best be described as tedious. The other place that the Mazda 3 is lacking a bit is in interior space. I don't sit far away from the steering wheel, and I really don't sit far back from the pedals, and I could not sit behind myself in this car. In its class, there's definitely cars that I can do that, and this isn't one of them. Even if you, by chance, have to put a rear-facing car seat behind the driver's seat, that gets challenging in this car. So, if you've seen all Mazda's commercials about the fact they still care about the way a car drives, I think they've accomplished that. This is a very good driving small car. As far as front-wheel drive compact sedans go, it may be the best driving in its class. There's ones that are faster, and if you really want fast, you can buy the Mazda Speed version of this with 260 some horsepower. But it's an entertaining little thing to drive. It's, like I said, it's a little bit dated in here and small on the inside. And I think the real kicker is this car, as it's optioned, is $24,500, which sadly in today's world isn't a ton of money, but it's a lot of money for a compact car. It is true you get leather heated seats and nav and blind spot detection and xenon headlights. That the one thing I didn't mention that's also part of the tech package is you get some of those automatically turning xenon headlights where as you turn the wheel it starts to illuminate your path in front of you. But still, it's a lot of money for this car. I think if anything, my takeaway from this would be is if this is something you're interested in, you can get the SkyActiv model in a lesser version with less stuff. That would be my pick, is something simpler, something less expensive, that's still fun to drive, because while the tech's nice, it doesn't add a ton to this car. And with this interface to be able to interact with it, it puts it at a pretty big disadvantage. So there's a quick review of the Mazda 3 SkyActiv sedan. I'm Kevin Gordon from Autosavant.com, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.